Soldiers. 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 Man, is that clever or just dumb? You're some nameless soldier in an army going to war. The king's trusted advisor switches up the strategy at the last minute, and this leads your entire platoon to the edge of a cliff where an earthquake swallows you all whole. Surrounded by darkness, a divine and brilliant light showers the group, and there for them to behold is a Valkyrie to take them to the afterlife. But things aren't what they seem, as the Valkyrie states they aren't actually dead. But whatever, I guess. She pressures them to walk into the light anyway, which of course they all do, and the adventure begins. I'm not going to mince words here. I hated Soldiers. So much so that I actually dropped the game after maybe 6 to 7 hours. Which is rare because I usually see all Metroidvanias through to the end. So why not this one? Gosh, for so many reasons I'll get into. But I don't want to jump the gun because there's a lot to like here too, so I want to at least bring all that up. Just so you can make your own conclusion whether or not you want to play it. Anyway, let's start with the combat. Combat's fine. It didn't blow my mind. Full disclosure, I only played as the standard soldier. The other two classes you can pick from, the archer and the mage, play completely differently. But I'm not a ranged fighting nerd, so I don't think playing as them would have changed my mind on this game. As the soldier, you have a light slash and a heavy slash, a roll with iframes, a block that can also parry, and a bunch of special moves that require MP. The basic flow of combat is deliberate and methodical, and attacking too hastily usually results in your death, as enemies in this game, especially the bosses, hit hard. Slow and steady wins the battle in this game. There's secondary weapons that are pretty dang helpful, but they require these little triangle energies to use, and I always ran out of that energy pretty quickly. As far as combat goes, this is the one real critique I had. Relegating your secondary weapons to this hard to come by energy made using them more a risk than a reward. And I always hated how I'd find an obviously fake wall, but I wouldn't have the energy necessary to lay down a bomb. Something I loved about the combat was the elemental switching aspect. Using the left analog stick, you could switch your elemental attribute on the fly, and many enemies have weaknesses and affinities, so knowledge of your enemies and learning to switch things up could gain you significant advantages. There are also items you can use, like potions to heal your HP and a potion that makes all your hits critical for a brief amount of time. Both of these items are literal lifesavers, so if you plan on playing this game, stock up. Like any Metroidvania, there are abilities you can acquire to increase your mobility so you can reach once unreachable areas, like boots that let you wall jump. Progression in Soldiers felt alright. It has a traditional leveling system that requires the exchange of your enemy's blood for EXP, and each level increases stats and gave you a skill point you could use on a skill tree to unlock abilities. It was all pretty standard, and there's not much to talk about as the skill tree was actually pretty tiny. You can also equip accessories to boost stats and add passive abilities. Weapons can be upgraded in Hafen City, the game's hub town. Cash, precious ores, and bugs could be exchanged here to make your stuff a little stronger. I didn't spend much time in the city, but there's a bounty board where you can start optional missions to hunt down wanted monsters. I ended up not doing a single hunt, but I'm sure it rewarded you with some kind of ore or equipment or cash or something. Look, I don't want to waste any more of your time by explaining things I'm not 100% sure on, because I stopped playing the game pretty early on. I'd rather get into why I felt this game no longer deserved my time, and it really has to do with two factors. One, its pacing, and two, and this one was the nail in Soldier's coffin for me, how broken it was on the Switch. First, let's talk about its pacing. This may all be subjective, but hear me out. Soldiers was straight up boring. Why? Because it liked to keep you in dungeons forever. Imagine, you purchase this fantastic looking pixel art masterpiece, and the first thing they do is shove you in a spider-filled cavern for 2 hours. It's dark, it's gloomy, it's not very pleasant to look at, and it's the game's first impression. It really took a toll on me. Most Metroidvanias take the player into an underground cavern eventually, but for hours right out the gate, I keep emphasizing the time because Soldiers really want you to spend as much time as possible in all their dungeons. I spent 3 hours in their pyramid dungeon and I wasn't even done with it. It just kept going and going and going. These overly long dungeons, especially one after the other, just grated on my soul. Exploration's a big deal in Metroidvanias, and to spend so much time in just 2 biomes feels like a sin to the genre. I want to explore. I want to hop from biome to biome, get stuck, backtrack, make notes on my map, find secrets. Souldiers very much locks you in one area. It was stifling and felt antithetical to traditional Metroidvania design. In the end, I just felt trapped and bored, things you don't want to feel in any game. And it wasn't like I couldn't figure anything out, these dungeons just kept going, and the fact that the game was so broken only made the slog feel more sloggy. This brings me to the second factor that contributed to me quitting this game, its brokenness. I got Souldiers day 1 because this game looked so good, and I'll admit it still looks fantastic. However, its performance is lackluster to put it mildly. On launch, the game was so unbalanced and so broken that the devs actually released a statement about the game's poor state and how they were going to fix it. And to their credit, according to other players, they apparently balanced the game so that it wasn't an unfair challenge anymore. But, at least on the Switch, the poor performance continued. For instance, load times were unbearable. Loading a save or loading a new biome could take upwards to 2 to 3 minutes, and the frame rate was atrocious. Stuttering could get so bad that enemies would kill me and I had no idea what happened. It was like a time skip ending with me being dead. That's when I knew I needed to take a hiatus from this game, give the devs some time to fix it. And upon returning almost an entire year later, surely I found Souldiers in better condition, right? Barely. Load times have improved, but they're still ridiculously long, and the constant crashing didn't help anything. The straw that broke the camel's back was when I defeated this particularly difficult boss, a recycled scorpion I had fought like twice already, and the game crashed. It forced me to refight that thing, and I just said nope, no joke. I turned the game off, contacted Nintendo, and asked for my money back for a year-old purchase. And how do you think that turned out? They gave me my money back. The game is that broken on the Switch that Nintendo gave me my money back almost a year later. I provided the game's patch notes to prove I was in good faith trying to like the game and was waiting on the devs to fix it. But after asking them to run a crash report, they were more than happy to make an exception. Thanks for doing me a solid, Nintendo. But I don't want you to think this game is all bad. The devs nailed the atmosphere in every area I visited. Everything looks gorgeous, the enemy designs were cool and the environments were a delight, and the sound design was spectacular. Every slash from your sword felt weighty and every explosion sounded boomy. The overall presentation on display throughout was top tier. It's just unfortunate it didn't perform well, at least on the Switch. There's not a lot I can comment on concerning its narrative. Again, I dropped this game when I got to the Pyramid Dungeon. What I can say is that the narrative never hooked me. I wasn't excited to figure out what was going on, and I wasn't attached to any of the characters, except maybe the dude that gets crushed in the pyramid. He was kinda cool. And the pig merchant was alright. From what I've read online, the narrative's nothing special, so take that for what it's worth. It probably goes without saying, I do not recommend Souldiers. Its pacing is atrocious, its overall gameplay is mid, and there was nothing there driving me to want to play it. Exploration was almost non-existent, and the story just wasn't gripping me. Someone might argue that the game gets better, but I had already dropped like 6+ hours into it, and I was never excited to boot it up. I always had to force myself to play this game, and after it crashed for like the 10th time, I knew I just couldn't take it anymore. I think the devs focused too much on style and not enough on substance. It's an absolute shame because the game is so beautiful and has so much potential. But, as it currently stands, I'd pass up Souldiers on any console, but especially on the Switch.